Hello and welcome to another TLDR US video. With Donald Trump's speech accepting the Republican nomination for president and the Republican National Convention in the history books, the general election is now officially underway. We did a video not long ago on why Trump may and may not be elected, and last week we did a video on Biden's chances of winning. So in this video, we're going to take a look at Joe Biden's chances and why he may lose the upcoming election. I know you're tired of hearing me say this, but we're not making any predictions. We'll leave that to people like Dr. Lixman, and you can see his prediction in our video on that topic. There's a link in the description. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified when we post. Also, if you want to support the channel, please consider signing up to our Patreon. We've just announced a whole new bunch of perks, including early access to videos, behind the scenes posts, seeing your name and likeness in videos, as well as new live events. We're even holding a Patreon exclusive live quiz this Sunday, where everyone who beats me wins a TLDR prize. There's a link to the Patreon down below. Before we get into the actual election, let's take a look at some of the history of Biden. I promise this will come into play later. Joe Biden served as Senator for Delaware until his election as Vice President alongside Barack Obama in 2008. After 8 years serving in the Obama administration, Biden decided against running for president in 2016, while he was still grieving the death of his son, Beau Biden, the former Delaware Attorney General. It's worth noting that during his 36 years in the Senate, Biden ran for president twice. Once in 1988, where he was forced to withdraw due to allegations of plagiarizing a speech from a former Labour Party leader, Neil Kinnock, and again in 2008, where, after a fifth-place finish in the Iowa caucus, he withdrew and endorsed then Illinois Senator Barack Obama. After a bitter primary against then New York Senator Hillary Clinton, Obama secured the Democratic nomination and tapped Joe Biden to be his running mate. Well, you know the rest. So, when we bring it forward to 2020, what exactly does Biden have working against him? Well, arguably his biggest problem is his age. He'll be 78 years old on Inauguration Day, and thus will be the oldest president ever inaugurated, be it first or second term. And despite Joe's and his wife Jill's assurances to the contrary, some have speculated that Biden suffers from some form of cognitive decline or ailment. Now, to be fair to Biden, some of these criticisms are probably due to the fact that he suffers from a stutter, something which clearly isn't his fault. It's also only fair to point out that Donald Trump, at 74 years old, isn't far behind Biden. However, when the former vice president was asked by CBS anchor Errol Barnett if he would take a test to examine his cognitive abilities, this is what happened.
Please clarify specifically, have you taken a cognitive test?
No, I haven't taken a test. Why the hell would I take a test? Come on, man. That's like saying before you got in this program, you take a test where you're taking cocaine or not. What do you think, huh? Are you a junkie?
What do you say to President Trump, who brags about his test and makes your mental state an issue for voters?
Well, if he can't figure out the difference between an elephant and a lion, I don't know what the hell he's talking about. Did you watch that? Look, come on, man. I know you're trying to goad me, but I mean, I'm so forward looking to have an opportunity to sit with the president or stand with the president in debates.
This question came after President Trump boasted about acing his cognitive test. In fact, we made a whole video on the Trump test where we put two of our own staff members on the spot and made them take the test too. There's a link to that video in the description. Anyway, critics were quick to point to Biden's refusal to take the test as evidence that Biden and his campaign know of his cognitive decline and are afraid of what the results may be. Now, before you roast us in the comments section, we are in no way saying that he's suffering from any kind of cognitive ailments, and we're also not saying that he's not. We're simply pointing out an argument that Biden's opposition is regularly making. In addition to Biden's age, something else might serve as a weakness: his experience. Yes, you heard me right. His abundance of experience could actually be a downside. Now, I know what you're thinking. Whoever thought that an overabundance of experience could be a disadvantage when running for president? But hear me out. Remember earlier when I said his history could come into play? Well, in 2003, a speechwriter for then-President George W. Bush, named John McConnell, discovered a 14-year rule that could be applied to presidents. Essentially, the theory posits that presidential candidates have roughly 14 years from their first election as governor or US senator to be elected president, a best by date for all intents and purposes. And for the most part, the rule holds true. And certainly, no one who served 36 years as a senator, as Biden did, has ever gone on to become the president. In fact, nobody who's even been in the Senate for 15 years went on to become president. Now, as with all rules, there are exceptions. George H.W. Bush, for example, never served as a senator or a governor, instead having a resume that saw him as a diplomat to the UN and China, and even as director of the CIA. But he was also following in the footsteps of a rather popular president in Ronald Reagan. Biden does still have a chance, even despite this rule, and that's by following in the footsteps of Richard Nixon, who returned to private life after his time as VP and his unsuccessful election campaign in 1960. The 14-year rule would assume that by his campaign of 1968, Nixon's expiry date would have passed. But due to his temporary return to private life, it seems that he's broken this rule. This is important for Biden, who's also running after having returned to a private life, possibly meaning that Biden's expiry date hasn't yet come. However, over the past few election cycles, voters seem to have taken the side of the lesser experienced candidate. Donald Trump certainly fits this mold, but so did Barack Obama, George W. Bush, and Bill Clinton. The preference for inexperience may also be a reflection of voter frustration with government, and the hope for an influx of new ideas to meet new challenges. But who knows? Anyway, so aside from his age and longevity in American politics, what other weaknesses does Biden have? Well, if we look at the history of vice presidents who went on to become presidents, the record isn't great. 14 vice presidents have gone on to assume the presidency. However, of those 14, 9 became president due to death, assassination, or resignation of their predecessor. Of the other 5, only 2 have taken place in the last 180 years, George H.W. Bush and Richard Nixon. So I say all of that simply to say that it's not common for a vice president to go on to become president without a death or resignation prompting their promotion. That's not the only historical trend that Mr. Biden should be worried about. Since World War II, only 3 sitting presidents have lost their bid for re-election. One of those was Gerald Ford, who became president upon the resignation of Richard Nixon in August 1974. In fact, he only became vice president because of the resignation of Spiro Agnew nearly a year earlier. In neither case was Ford actually elected into office. So, because of the unique circumstances of him becoming president, we can't exactly count it as him having lost his re-election. In the other 2 circumstances, Jimmy Carter in 1980 and George H.W. Bush in 1992, the economy was suffering a prolonged recession in very different circumstances than the one that the US and indeed the rest of the world is currently experiencing. Not to mention that both lost to exceptionally charismatic figures. Now, in the case of Donald Trump, the economy is certainly undergoing a recession. But, as we pointed out before, it was caused by the onset of the coronavirus, and as such, voters may not hold him responsible for the economic downturn. The point is here, more often than not, in modern US politics, Americans give their presidents a second term. But to be fair to Biden, while he probably won't be remembered as a once-in-a-generation candidate that is inspirational to a vast majority of the population, he does maintain higher favourables than President Trump. Unfortunately for Biden, however, another historical trend in US politics is that during crises such as the current pandemic, the electorate is usually more comfortable sticking with the same horse. We can point to examples in the First World War with Woodrow Wilson, the Great Depression and World War II with Franklin Roosevelt, and even the Civil War with Abraham Lincoln. There is one more thing we need to address: the Electoral College. In 2016, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by nearly 3 million votes. However, because of his narrow victories in the Rust Belt states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, Donald Trump was able to win the Electoral College vote. And if 2000 and 2016 have taught us anything, it's that the Electoral College favours the Republicans over the Democrats. In fact, all 5 times in the US history that presidents have won the Electoral College but not the popular vote, it was the Republicans who won and the Democrats who lost. So it's certainly a possibility that Trump could secure a second term by again winning the Electoral College without winning the popular vote. Now, none of this is to say that Biden doesn't stand a chance. After all, it's only early September and a lot can change between now and then. Not to mention, Biden still maintains a frankly good lead over Trump in match-up polling. So, what do you think? Is Biden's age or longevity an issue? Should voters hold Trump responsible for the coronavirus recession? Or should they remember the successful economy that Trump presided over pre-coronavirus? And finally, should voters change horse mid-crisis or stick the course? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified every time we post. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible. And if you want to see your name listed at the end of the videos just like these people, then be sure to back us on Patreon. The link to that's in the description.